Hey friends, so a lot of you seem to have enjoyed my previous two big budget brew videos, the 50 decks under $50 and more recently the 25 decks under $25. And I also noticed a ton of positive comments about the $10 Paco Halden list I gifted Krim for the latest Commander Clash episode. So I decided to make another budget video with a deck that is as strong as, if not stronger than, the Paco Halden list. This is a $15 Sergeant John Benton list. This is an absolutely ruthless Voltron commander, all in on our commander, just trying to kill everybody with commander damage. And despite only being $15, this is a very cutthroat, ruthless deck that is going to just straight up stomp pre-con level decks. It's more suited towards mid to even like mid to high level playgroups. So the entire deck is built around our commander, Sergeant John Benton. This is a 3-mana Selesnya 2/4 legendary creature human soldier. It has trample and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So John is a very simple creature. It's a 3-drop, it has trample and haste, so it immediately starts smashing in for damage, and as much damage as you deal to a player, you and that player both draw that many cards. So by itself, with just 2 power, you're going to draw 2 cards, and your opponent is going to draw 2 cards. But if you increase the power of John, you're going to draw more cards, and the person you smashed is also going to draw that many cards too. So John is basically a secret rendezvous in the command zone. You're going to be drawing cards, but your affected opponent is also going to be drawing cards. However, the major difference here is, first of all, this is in the command zone, so you can fully build around this effect. And secondly, the opponent who's drawing cards is also going to be taking commander damage in the process. You're not just giving them cards for free, they're going to be taking a lot of damage in return. And guess what? That is our win condition, is commander damage on our opponent. So it actually furthers our win condition too. So at first glance, a lot of people are going to underrate John if you haven't seen the deck in action. Because, you know, giving your opponents free resources is, generally speaking, a bad thing, right? You're working really hard to draw those cards, but then your opponents get to draw that many cards for free as well too. That seems like a bad trade. However, we've seen this effect on commanders many times before, and some of the scariest budget commanders in the entire format historically have abilities similar to that. So John's ability is very similar to Xyrus. It's like the exact same card text. Xyrus costs more mana though, is in Teamer color, so it has an extra color. It costs more mana, but it makes snakes as well too. And it also doesn't have haste. It has flying, so it's better evasion, but it doesn't have haste. I think John is actually just stronger than Xyrus, by the way, but Xyrus is already incredibly powerful. And then my personal favorite commander of all time, Edric Spymaster of Tress, is another type of like group hug commander where you're helping the entire table, right? Like you're drawing cards, but if your opponents hit each other, they get to draw cards too. That's kind of group huggy too, right? But the trick to all these commanders is that we're building around this effect and our opponents aren't. Everybody's going to be drawing a lot of cards, and that sounds very symmetrical, but our deck is actually focused on utilizing all that card draw by keeping our mana cost as low as possible. The average mana value of all the spells in our deck, I believe, is like 1.51, so between 1 and 2 mana for all the spells, and we have a lot of spells that just cost no mana at all if we discard a card or exile a card from our hand, for example. And so yes, everybody's going to be drawing a lot of cards, but we can actually cast all the spells we're going to be drawing, whereas our opponents with a regular mana curve are just going to struggle to actually deploy all the things we're giving them. So as I've said before, John is a Voltron deck. All we want to do is cast our commander, pump up our commander's power, and smash face, dealing a lethal 21 or more commander damage to each of our opponents so they die. It's a very straightforward strategy. Now, John takes care of all the card draw for our deck. His ability scales up, so the higher power John is, the more cards we draw. So the rest of the cards in the deck fall into basically 4 main categories. Pump effects to increase John's power, protection to make sure he doesn't die, interaction to blow up things that need blowing up, and then finally ramp, stuff that allow us to deploy John and our other spells faster. So the core of the deck is the pump effects. And again, we're trying to find the most mana efficient ways to increase John's power. The biggest bang for the cheapest buck. The absolute best card to do this is Invigorate. It costs 0 mana and it gives John +4/+4, which is absolutely insane. And keep in mind, all these pump effects are going to be drawing us that many more cards too. So if we Invigorate John, we're drawing 4 extra cards when we're smashing an opponent. Another excellent pump card in the deck is Groundswell. Paying 1 mana to increase power and toughness by 4 is fantastic. It's obviously not quite as good as Invigorate, but nothing else really is. And another type of pump effect that I really like in this deck are stuff that gives it Vigilance, John Vigilance, because we don't have that many creatures that could be good blockers, and we are going to definitely be in an arch enemy role, so we need to deter potential attackers, potential crackback. So something like Show Confidence is really, really good in the mid to late game, because by mid to late game, we can pump John like maybe 2 or 3 times before we cast Show of Confidence. John gets permanently buffed by the +1/+1 counters and has Vigilance, so we can crack somebody without worrying about a crackback. Even more important though are the protection spells. Again, we're trying to focus on the most mana efficient ways to protect John. John can die like once or twice in a game, but since all of our eggs are in our commander basket, we really can't afford to have him just out of the game for most of the time. So we're looking for hexproof and we're looking for indestructibility, ideally both, and as mana efficiently as possible. So Lauren's Escape is one of the absolute best protection spells. For 1 mana, you get both hexproof and indestructible. That's kind of unbeatable. And then other really cool cards, Royal Treatment gives basically John +1/+1 and Ward on top of giving it instant speed hexproof, which is quite nice. And for 2 mana, which is double, we get to actually give John +3/+3 and indestructible, which is very nice. Basically, it comes with a free Ancestral Recall. So that's how we win the game. But we also have to slow down our opponents so they don't win the game before we do. And we're going to do that with our removal package. Again, we're focused on mana efficiency. So a card like Abolish is not really playable in most decks. However, when we're drawing like 7+ cards a turn with John Benton, we're always going to have an extra planes in our hand to cast Abolish for free. And a free disenchant is just fantastic. Ran Through is 2 mana, which is, more expensive. However, it really utilizes what John's really good at, which is pumping him up, making him really, really big, and then utilizing that trample to deal that excess damage to an opponent's face, which can actually take out a player. And Savage Swipe is really cute tech. John is typically a 2-power creature before we start pumping it up. So Savage Swipe for 1 mana, you give it +2/+2, and then you get to also fight something. That's fantastic. And then, you pump John even more before you go and swing and deal combat damage. So a lot of our removal spells can actually double up as pump effects for John. And then finally, we have the ramp package. The most important ramp spells in the deck are things you can deploy on turn 1 so that we can cast John as early as turn 2. Being able to cast John on turn 2 as opposed to turn 3 means we can snowball out of control that much quicker. So that's what we're going to be aiming for in most games. So any mana dork like Llanowar Elves is going to be fantastic here, or any 1-drop that enters the battlefield and can generate mana somehow, such as playing additional lands from our hand onto the battlefield like a Boreal Grazer, is just going to be fantastic. And then beyond that, once John is on the battlefield or whatever, anything that can like passively ramp us while still advancing our goals, either with interaction or pump effects or what have you, is going to be really good here as well too. So like Broken Bond is a disenchant that also just puts a land onto the battlefield. And again, we're going to be drawing so many cards with John that we're always going to have an extra land to put on the battlefield or discard to Abolish or whatever. And that's literally the entire deck. Look at the curve. We have 35 1-drops, 12 2-drops, 7 3-drops, and that's not even including the free spells. So one of my favorite cards in the entire deck is Snag. It's a fog that you can cast for 0 mana. It's technically a 4-drop, but in reality, it's going to be a 0-drop in this deck. It's basically a pile of draft chaff, just bulk that you'll find in a shoebox or whatever, and you just put them together, and then suddenly John just makes it into a powerhouse. It's very silly. Now, the $15 deck is fully functional. It's really sweet, but if you want to juice it up just a little bit, I also have a $25 list. We've upgraded the lands a little bit. We've upgraded the interaction a little bit. I've added like Generous Gift. A Glacial Chasm, for example, can make us really sad. So some answers to Glacial Chasms is really nice. And we've added some more of the best protection spells like Tamio's Safekeeping, which is just like a more expensive Loran's Escape. The deck isn't drastically better than the $15 version of it, but if you happen to have some of these extra cards laying around, you might as well throw them in and John will work just a little bit better. Beyond this though, I don't actually recommend upgrading John much higher than $25, honestly. You don't really get that much more power if you start like throwing in your Temple Gardens or whatever into the list. It gets a little bit better, a little bit more consistent, but not that much more so. And if you are being terrorized by a John Benton deck in your playgroup, one of the easiest ways to counter him is like Soul Shatter. Anything that forces them to sacrifice, none of our protection spells kind of assist us in this. So a Soul Shatter is just going to one-shot John very efficiently. So basically, force sacrifice and focusing on sacrificing the highest mana value creature, because otherwise you could just sacrifice like a Mana Dork or something like that, like a Llanowar Elf. And yeah, that's John Benton. It is really scary, so word of caution, it could pump stop a lot of like pre-con level or mid-power level tables. And also keep in mind that John's going to be an arch enemy deck. You really can't allow John to deal combat damage for more than 2 or 3 turns, because by that point, if you do find some removal for John, chances are John's already going to be holding up like 6 protection spells in their hand at any given time. So that's already too late. But yeah, if you want a new dirt cheap deck for your mid-power tables or even mid to high power tables, or you just want to show people that $15 brews are actually, or if you just want to show people that $15 brews can actually stomp, John Benton is the deck for you. I hope you enjoyed this quick deck tech. Like and subscribe if you do, and until next time, friends, see ya!